By devoting just 6 minutes each weekday for 1 year, you can read through the entire New Testament using David's servant's daily devotional, HeavenWord Daily. Order your copy at heavenword.tv.
Well, it's so good to be back together one more time as we continue our chronological study through the entire New Testament. And we're in Matthew chapter 28, and at the same time, we're making a comparison with the other reports of the three other gospel writers, because piecing it all together, you get a much better picture of what happened on that resurrection morning, Sunday morning, than you do by looking at any one of them by themselves. Keep in mind that it is commonly thought that because John's gospel contains over 90% unique material that you don't find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that he wrote many years later and was just really attempting to fill in some blanks that he realized existed, knowledge that he had because he was one of the closest disciples of Jesus. If we were to read Matthew's account just by itself, we could come to wrong conclusions that are cleared up by looking at other gospel writers. But let's jump back into Matthew chapter 28 and see what we come up with. I've got to reread verse number 1, if you don't mind, of Matthew 28. Now, after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn, toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. Verse 2, behold, a severe earthquake had occurred, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon it. And his appearance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. Well, this is, pretty scary stuff. Verse 4, and the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. Well, have you ever been so afraid that you could not move or speak? I have only on a couple of occasions that I can remember consciously, and they were all in my dreams. I was so scared because of what was transpiring in the drama of my dream that I wanted to scream out and yell because of the bad guy or whoever was sneaking up, and I was frozen. I was paralyzed with fear. And that's exactly what happened to these guys, and I can understand why. If I had been in their shoes, I think I'd have been paralyzed with fear also. Obviously, God wanted them to shake with fear. Now, remember, we read in verse number 2 of Matthew 28 that after this angel rolled away the stone, he sat on it. And apparently, the guards saw all this take place. I don't know if they saw his ascension from heaven, but they saw the stone moving, and apparently they saw this angel, and that's what paralyzed them with fear. And then, this angel's sitting on the stone that it's moved. We could very easily conclude that that angel kept on sitting on that stone, and when Mary and the other women got there, that's the first thing they saw. Oh my goodness, there's an angel sitting on the stone that is moved. But remember, we've already studied this last time in John's gospel, that Mary perhaps came by herself when it was still dark, just saw the stone rolled away, and then ran back and got Peter and John. Okay? And so, we don't want to make assumptions just because, it seems that's how it was according to Matthew's gospel. Look at all the other gospels too and see if we can bring some insight into those things that we normally assume. Because in verse 4 of Matthew 28, the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who has been crucified. Now you're probably imagining that angel sitting there on that stone. And the women walk up, and there's these, paralyzed Roman soldiers lying on the ground, shaking and so forth. And the women see this angel, and the angel speaks to them directly. But that's not what happened according to other gospel writers. And we're just making an assumption that is not correct, okay? Let's take a look at Luke's gospel. Luke chapter 24. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, so they're in the tomb now, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. They again are seeing those empty linen wrappings, the cocoon, which I've described. And verse number 4, while they were perplexed about this. Now here's some chronology that clears up an assumption we would have made in Matthew's gospel. While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men suddenly stood near them in dazzling clothing. Well, there you have it. So one angel rolled away the stone, but they've disappeared from sight. And then Mary and the other women find the tomb empty. And again, I think that Luke is leaving lots of details that John included. I think Mary has already been there. She told John and Peter, they came, she came back, they left, she's still there with the other women, and now this is all taking place. And they're perplexed about this. They see these guys in dazzling clothing, obviously two angels. And as the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living one among the dead?" So again, they're terrified. They're paralyzed with fear. They fall to the ground in fear. And these angels inside the tomb of Christ speak to them and question what they're doing, looking for somebody who's living among the dead. Verse 6, "He is not here, but he has risen." This is now Luke's gospel. "Remember how he spoke to you while he was still in Galilee, saying that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again." And they remembered his words and returned from the tomb and reported all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. Well, I think, according to John's gospel, Mary and maybe another woman or two, we don't know because John doesn't say, have already been to the tomb, back, told Peter and John. Peter and John come. Mary comes back again with the other Mary and a few other women. Peter and John leave. That's when these women look inside the tomb for themselves, because they came after Peter and John had already gone inside the tomb and come out. They look inside. They're perplexed. They see these two angels, and then they return once again. And they don't just report this time to Peter and John. They report to the 11. So they're saying this time they've got more to report. The first time, all that Mary could report was they've taken the body. The stones rolled away. But this time they can report, oh my goodness, we've seen angels. And there's actually more to the story than that. They actually saw more than angels. And it's not real clear in the synoptics, but in John's gospel it becomes much, much more clear. Okay? All right, so stick around and stay with me as we look at what else happened on that amazing Sunday morning. I'll see you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.